all my days. I can tell and I know it's your grace all my days. Good evening, you are my earliest guest. Good evening, everyone. This is Christopher Ainomel Mojiade. I like to refer to myself as the multi-potentialite with several God-given expressions. And if you're joining us live or you're listening to this as a rebroadcast on YouTube or any other platforms, you are welcome. It is Conversations with the CEO, and I am super pumped and glad to be here. Conversations with the CEO is a set of conversations that have been set up by the Christian Mojade Company, where we invite leaders of thoughts, we invite industry leaders to give their perspective on various subject matters that intersect three core areas: leadership, relationship, and finance. And this edition is the leadership edition, and it is in furtherance of one of my new books, So You Want to Lead. And I am super glad to have on this call a guest that I call a sister, somebody that I respect so much. I call her an Amazon. She's a force of nature. She's a leadership expert par excellence, trained some of the top tier organizations across diverse industries, both in Nigeria and across Africa. She's known to simplify leadership in a way that makes it so easy for a 3-year-old. And I am so glad to have her on this conversation. We are speaking about leadership in tough times, leadership in trying times. And as soon as she sends a request, I will bring her on the call. So if you can hear me, Mrs. Kemi Ukoya, please send me your request and we'll bring you on the call so that we can enrich lives. I can't wait to hear your perspective on leadership and how we can get past it. Call right now. Again, it is Conversations with the CEO. Welcome everybody that would sacrifice their time and their energy for this. I will try and make sure that it is 1 hour that is beautiful. Good evening, woman of God.
Good evening.
What part of
How
the
are you
world?
doing?
What part of the world am I getting you now? What part of the
I
world?
am on planet Earth.
I know that part. What part of planet Earth
on,
are you on right now?
on planet Earth.
One
Let's see if I
minute you are in Nairobi teaching leadership, the other you are in London teaching leadership. How do you put all of this together, woman of God? How do you do it?
Grace, 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 grace,
Well said.
grace. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
for honoring
much.
me. Thank you for honoring the team and coming on the call. So, like I was letting our viewers and those who will join us know, if I need to pin this right now, leadership in tough times. Yes, tough times. That's what it is. So, how do we get past leadership in tough times? And when I was putting together the individuals who were going to be part of this call, when your name came up, there was even no controversy. It was like you just sailed through without everybody just acknowledged and no. But woman of God, tell me, let's start off with the most basic. I found out that even when I teach leadership, you would assume that your class and your audience know what leadership really is. So let's start at the basic. We have just an hour. I want to make it count. Getting you on this call is everything. What is leadership to you?
All right. Thank you so much for having me, and I celebrate you for the great work that you're doing. It's really a honor to be here, and I'm happy that we're doing this together. So, simplifying leadership is something that I love. So, I will make it as easy and simple as possible. And when we talk about leadership, leadership is, a combination of certain elements from your personality to your behaviors, to your interests, to your strengths and weaknesses, to your triggers, being able to bring all of those elements together to achieve results with and through others, right? It's what I classify to be leadership in its basic form. But what I've also come to realize is that, a lot of times when we talk about leadership, there's this notion that it's all about leading other people, being able to get things done, being able to drive projects, being able to drive results. But I say that the starting point of leadership is from the place of self, right? If
Okay.
you cannot lead yourself, you will struggle to lead others. So being able to culminate all these elements that I spoke about in a way that helps you achieve personal results and then helps you achieve results with and through others is really what leadership encompasses.
Amazing. I will jump on a phrase that you just used, the ability to lead yourself, because in the course of my writing the new books, so I know you're aware, thank you for honoring and celebrating and pushing it out. I see what you do. So I had the opportunity to write those three books on leadership. One, So You Want to Lead. And the philosophy behind that book was identifying leadership principles that are important for anyone who wants to start their leadership journey. And I also did a deep dive on leadership gems in the Bible, both the New Testament and the Old Testament. But I want to ask you something. Marcus Aurelius was somebody I profiled in the book So You Want to Lead. He was one of the greatest Roman emperors that ever lived, and he understood that he needed to lead himself before he could lead an entire empire. Why do we struggle then in this side of the divide? Why do we struggle in Black Africa? Why are we struggling in Nigeria in finding out that our leaders are not able to lead themselves first? Why do we struggle with that tyranny?
Okay. All right. So for starters, I would say that, it's not just a Nigerian or African problem. I'd say that self-leadership in itself is the toughest type of leadership, right? And that's because if you take a look at how easy it is to, pass on a piece of advice to someone, you can pretty much see what is wrong with other people, right? And if we take a look at ourselves, we see that it's easier for us to there's this quote about you taking out a log in somebody's eyes, or taking out the speck in
Speck in
somebody's eyes
your
when you
eyes.
have a log in
Yep,
your own eyes,
log in
right?
yours.
So it's easier sometimes for us to see what's happening on the other side of things. And if I could borrow from the use of a particular tool in that we use in leadership called the Johari window, where you have four major quadrants. You have the open arena, you have your blind spot, you have hidden, you have the unknown, which means that there are certainly so many things about us that we cannot see or we may not see until somebody else
Points it
brings it
out.
to our attention. Now, self-leadership in itself is tough, right? And that's why it requires great level of intentionality. It requires ability and it requires will. Now, that part of it is where we struggle, right? Because until we get to the point where we're able to push ourselves beyond self-desire, self-interest, and then we start to look at self-objectivity, right? We're starting to look at self-awareness. We would always have this problem where it seems like we don't want to start with self, because starting with self is tough, right? Being able to sit yourself, to have a conversation, honest conversation where we can be objective enough with ourselves. It's tough, and it requires quite a lot. So we find out that because the environment we don't even understand what leadership in itself is, because we have not been shown what leadership is.
Yeah.
We have been shown what we assume it
Zoom
to
it
be
is.
because of what we have
Yeah.
seen. And these are things that we have seen even in the family units, right?
Yeah.
Where we've grown up, and a lot of people have grown up in homes where it's been about command, just pretty much command, because daddy has said it, that's it, right? We live in a generation now where we have kids who would ask you questions. Why do
Yeah.
you want me to do it? And then we go like, you know what, that's the problem. All these Gen Zs, all these millennials, who are you to question? If I say it,
Yeah.
then I say it. No, right? So if we have grown with that, you went to school, you had a teacher who is telling you, who are you to
Yeah.
question me? What right do you
Yeah.
have to question my authority? I told you to sit down, put your head on the table and sleep. That's it, right? Without explaining without helping people understand. So when we grow up in such dysfunction, that's what we would assume leadership is. So we assume that it's about power, excessive use of power, it's about hubris, it's about control, it's about manipulation, it's about instructing people. And that totally shifts us away from the place of responsibility. It takes us away from the place of service. It takes us from the place, it takes us totally away from the place of, empathy. It takes us away from being able to democratize the essence of leadership. And that's why we find ourselves
So
where we are. So it is the wrong concept
yeah,
and understanding of leadership that
yeah.
pretty
So
much has led us there.
you would say then, I'm not mistaken if I conclude to
Yeah,
say that one of the reasons why we find ourselves in such a tough times where as a country, I'm trying to localize, I'm trying to bring it
yeah,
back home. And
yeah,
when I say
yeah,
leadership, I'm not even referring to leadership at its highest level where we have the
mm,
president, commander in chief of the
mm,
Federal Republic
yeah,
of
yeah,
Nigeria. I'm trying to
mm,
bring it down. I love what you did. You brought it all the way back to the home level, which is the
yeah,
smallest unit
yeah.
of society.
Mm.
Are you trying to now conclude more or less that it is the dysfunction that all of us literally were brought up with by people who didn't understand leadership that may be responsible for where we have found ourselves as a nation or even as the world in general?
Mm,
Is it that dysfunction that you want to nail on the cross right now?
significantly, I would say, right? And that's because, so I usually say this. I say that as people, we don't show up as we want to sometimes. We show up the way we have been shown. And when we look at how we grow or where we are as individuals, right? It's a function of both nature and nurture. But nurture plays a significant role in how we see life, right? Even in our
Repeat that
perspective.
again, man. Repeat
Right,
that
right.
again, man. Eureka moment.
Growing,
Go ahead.
it's a combination of both nature and nurture,
Nature and
right?
nurture.
Yeah. So, but nurture plays a significant part because in as much as and let's take a look at this. Somebody who has a natural talent for singing, right? You may have a good voice, and then you don't nurture it. You will find out that somebody else who has spent hours practicing, just honing their skills, now seems to be a better person, even though they ordinarily might have not been classified as a natural, right? So you find out that because they have constantly, honed their skills, they have put in a lot of hours of practice, then it seems like, what, they're the best in the world. And we see that around us. So it plays a significant part, what we have seen, what we have been shown, and what we see around us. So if you live in a highly oppressive environment, that's all
That's
you
what you're going to
know, right?
produce.
That's all you know. So if you have, and I'll give an example. I used to know of someone who worked in a very toxic environment, left that environment because of the level of toxicity, and then years later started out, their own organization. And when they started out, guess what?
Played out
Guess who was
success.
worse
Yeah.
than the person they ran away from?
Yeah.
This person, right? So it is a function of what we have seen, and that was a function of nurture. Nurture. They have been groomed, and when we bring it home to even how we raise kids, right? The people who the default nature of communicating with their kids is shouting, right? And unless they shout at that kid, they raise their voice, somewhere in the kid's mind, they have not processed the fact that somebody has spoken, because you have not spoken in a way that they have been conditioned to understand based on the place of nurture, how they have been nurtured, how they have been raised. So when we live in an environment like this, what we have come to understand right from the home unit is what we take out in the society, and then that becomes the prevalent culture in that environment or that society, as the case may be.
Well said. I love the twist with a lot of emotional intelligence that you've introduced. Now, when I'm opportune, I call it blessed actually to occupy a few leadership positions, and I can tell you that it is one of the most demanding, one of the most stressful, one of the most thankless in some regards jobs that you can do. As a leader, you can prepare for everything. But we found ourselves, and I'm not even referring to only Nigeria, I speak all across the world, where businesses, family units, government institutions, everybody seems to be struggling when it comes to leadership, regardless of gender, regardless of age, regardless of nationality, regardless of skin color, regardless of religion. Meaning that leadership is more or less a leveler. It doesn't respect all those human elements that you and I easily point out. Now, it's a tough season. Businesses are closing down. Governments can't make sense of it. And everybody is looking up to leadership. What would you say or advise if a leader picks up his call? Maybe it's the British Prime Minister, maybe you're in the UK right now, and he's just been PM only for a few weeks. And he says, Mrs. Kemai, I'm the British Prime Minister, I'm in trouble. There are riots on the streets of people attacking immigrants. The economy is in a spin fall. I don't know what to do. What would your first advice be to a leader that is literally leading in uncertain and tough times?
Okay, so I think the first thing I would say is I'm Kemi, not Kemai.
You're
I'm
Kemai.
kidding.
You're Kemai. We're calling from 10 Downing
Kemi,
Street. I'm
Kemi,
sorry. We're
Kemi.
calling from
You
10
have to call
Downing
me
Street.
Kemi,
You're
right?
Kemai. You're Kemai.
I know, no,
Your name is Kemai. Kemai. So,
Kemi.
Mrs. Kemai, Mrs. Kemai, can you answer the question, Mrs. Kemai?
Right, Kemi, please. All right, but on a serious note, right? Leadership boils down to clarity, and it's like the starting point, right? Whether it's clarity around self, clarity around issues, clarity around the peculiarity of certain situations. And I say that when it also comes to leadership, there's no one, you know,
No,
sorry,
no.
a call came in there.
That might
Okay,
be
so
10
that
Downing Street trying to get Kemai. I
I
told you.
better call
They're
me
trying to get
Kemi.
Kemai,
They
man.
better call me.
They're trying to get Kemai on the phone, man.
It boils down to clarity, and I say that when it comes to being able to deal with issues, you require a great level of clarity, especially in the world of today, where we're looking at we talk about VUCA, right? Concept like VUCA. We talk about how volatile situations are,
Can you
the
spell
great
out to the
level of
audience for those who don't know what
uncertainty.
VUCA means? Can you
Okay,
help us out?
so VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's a term that was coined in just right after the World War.
World War.
And, it was a term coined by the military just to really depict the peculiarity of those times, right? That required them to have good level of understanding. There was so many uncertainties, there was ambiguity, and they were dealing with change in an unprecedented manner, which is what we, pretty much focus or dealing with today. Now, I usually say start with clarity, right? And that would be my first advice, starting with clarity. And when we talk about clarity, it's about you even starting from a place of understanding what you're dealing with. Now, I see that in our world today, maybe because of the demand of agility, right? Because there's
Yeah.
also the place of agility in all of this. We
Yeah.
want to deal with issues very quickly because we're dealing with so much already, anyways, right? So we want to deal with things very quickly. But I say that, agility doesn't take away the place of critical thinking, right? It doesn't take away the place of understanding what is the situational peculiarity of what we're dealing with. So my first advice would be understand what you're dealing with,
Yeah.
right? Understand what you're dealing with. And when we look at tough times, it pretty much just stems from the place of having that level of clarity.
Yeah.
Who are we dealing with? So, for example, there were crises in the UK recently where there was uprising, a lot of protests. We've seen that even in Nigeria, we've
Yeah.
seen that in Bangladesh. And
Kenya.
for
Yeah.
yeah. We see that happening all over. And what I realize is that when we're dealing with issues, right, based on the symptoms, then we're not dealing with the real issues, right? Because whatever we do to just plaster it and make it look good will probably be maybe a temporary solution. But when we're not dealing with it based on the root cause, then we would have a problem, right? So what exactly is the root cause? What exactly is the root cause? And that's what brings us to that level of understanding. What are people really upset about? Are we listening to them? Are we communicating right with them? Are we able to empathize with them? Are we able to understand their pain? Because when people are agitated about something and we're just plastering, no, this is what we want to achieve, then we're not solving the problem, right? We're not helping, we're not acknowledging their pains. And I see that a lot of issues around leadership really stems from this lack of clarity and communication, effective communication around issues that people are dealing with. So I would say start with clarity, right? Understand what people are going to. Tough times definitely require tough decisions, right? But then leaders have to be equipped to have the right competence, so whether it's clarity, whether it's communication, whether it's being able to empathize with people, whether it's having the right character. And I'm sure in the course of our conversation we'll still
I,
come
I'm
back to this, but
I'm even
you
I'm
don't
even about to
understand. Yeah.
I'm even about to touch it right now. But before I
Okay.
do, those who are just joining us, I'm speaking to a leadership expert, maestro, Amazon, a woman of different parts, anointed of the Almighty, charged and empowered to change and transform lives when it comes to leadership across industries. You all need to listen. If you're just joining, I always give out freebies. My team are in a good mood. We're giving a lot of free stuff. If you're just joining and you want to get a material that is based on leadership, I have only two requests. Number one, you're following Kemi's page and you're following this page. If you're following these two pages, go up to my DM and just write leadership, drop your email address. Someone's going to send you something. Now, you just touched on empathy and a listening ear, and how important it is for leaders to be able to open up and listen. Now, I'm about to give you two examples and let you now ride on that further to expand our minds. While you were speaking, I remember I wrote an article once for The Guided, and they had to do with listening here, leaders who listen. And I referenced the Arab Spring of the early 2010s and all, and how something as little as not listening can literally bring down an entire country. You had a fruit seller who got frustrated and upset that his wares were constantly confiscated by authorities. He got tired of complaining to the provisional governor who was no longer listening. And when he had had enough, he took a jug of fuel, went in front of the government office, and set himself on fire. When he did that, he had no idea that he was going to topple at least 6 governments, if I'm not mistaken with my numbers. Goes to show you. Second example I'm about to give you, or about to give the audience, and allow you help us expatiate. In the early 1900s, you had the Russian Tsar, who was the king at the time, and they were the last reigning monarch. Why was that so instructive? Because whilst they lived in luxury and lived in the best, they had no idea that the Muscovites were in abject poverty. I mean, they were dying by the hundreds and the thousands, and you had the monarchy who couldn't understand this. So it was quite easy for Lenin and the rest to come over with communism and topple them. I give you two examples. Why is listening a major problem for leaders? Why can't they just listen? Is there something about when we get into the leadership bubble that suddenly just blocks our eardrums? Or what's the problem when it comes to leaders and listening?
Mm. Okay. All right. There are a lot of problems, and try to break them down. First is listening is not the easiest thing to do, right? We
Okay.
hear
Mm.
because even before we were born, we were hearing from our mother's
Yeah.
womb, right? A lot of us responded to music.
Yeah.
You just feel that there's more movement. By the time we experienced what the outer world looked like, we don't have a problem hearing. We could hear sounds, we could make sense of, conversations, and automatically we assume that hearing was listening.
Mm.
Now, to listen, you require extra effort. You require greater level of intentionality to not just, have had something from the outer level of your ear, but really being able to process that information that you have had, taking away ambiguity, taking away distractions, and distractions like even hunger, right? Things like hunger, and other things that could be in the way. So listening in itself requires great level of intentionality. I know organizations that send their top executives for listening training. And that's just how important listening is. So first is that we need to get to the point where we understand that hearing and listening are not the same. And that for you to listen, you have to get to that point where you intentionally tune your mind, your body, and your soul to be present. Now, a lot of people are not present, right? They're everywhere but where they are. So let's deal with that, right? That listening requires a great level of intentionality. Now, when we get into the point of understanding the dynamics of leadership, right? A lot of times when people step into leadership, they start to move further away from the people, their constituents or the people they're leading. And for you to constantly stay where they are, and when I talk about where they are, not just the physical area or physical place, constantly stay attuned, it has to be deliberate, right? Because by the time you're leading, there are a lot of intermediaries, the people who are communicating back and forth. And if you are in a place of comfort, which, if I could bring in a concept of, a dance floor and a balcony, right? If you're at the place where you're just on the balcony, okay, you don't understand what's happening on the dance floor again. You can just see, okay, I can see this, I can see that. But the moment you start to eject and move away, then the chances of you really being able to understand what people are going through, their perspective, to be able to empathize, and see things through their lens may start to become more difficult. Okay. And when that happens, you may not feel things as they feel it, right? And there's an image I usually use when I'm in public coaching classes, where I have this log, and I put it on the screen first, and I say, "Oh, how many logs do you see?" And people are like, "Oh, I see 4." And then somebody says, "Well, if I look at it from the right, I see 3." But then when I look at it from the other side, I see 4. And then those who could just see 3 now start to see 4. Those who were just able to see 4 can now see 3 because of their perspective. Their perspective shifted because they moved away from where they were to be able to see it where the person was looking at it from. Now, if there is a huge lacuna, it will be difficult for you to experience the perspective of others, right? So sometimes it's not because they don't want to see, it is because they do not have the ability to experience life again from that perspective. And that's why you cannot just, sit on your high tops, your high roof, and expect to lead. Leadership requires you understanding, who am I serving? Because when you understand who you're serving, and the responsibility of leadership, that it's not just for you to enrich yourself, it's not just for you to be empowered, it is for you to also empower others. When we understand the responsibility of leadership, then we would ensure that we are doing everything to be close enough to the people that we're leading. So example of the last they were so far away from the people, right? That even when people were feeling pain, they couldn't feel it. And just when you spoke about it, there's this other movie, The Man in the Iron Mask, right? It was also because they couldn't feel what the other person was feeling. They couldn't understand what hunger was anymore, right? So when you say, "Oh, you're hungry," okay, they can't relate. Honestly, they couldn't relate. So unless we are intentional about ensuring, having clarity about those who we're serving, and that we are trying to be in their shoes, experience what life looks like in their shoes. We've seen situations where CEOs, leaders have gone undercover, right, as mystery shoppers, just to see from the other side. So the more we attempt to be further away from the people, the more we cannot feel their pain. But the more we're intentional, about staying close to
Yeah.
them, staying close to the people that we lead, listening to them, being intentional, not just looking at it from your perspective, but trying to enter their perspective, entering even an objective perspective, then we
Yeah.
will not lose out on being able to listen to them. We'll not just be hearing, because sometimes we're hearing, we're not
We're not
making
making
sense of
sense
it. We will
of it.
get to the point where we can actually listen, and that way we're more connected.
I honestly enjoy that. I enjoy that. And whilst you were speaking, I mean, it crossed my mind again about how oftentimes I like to use the analogy of the military to further broaden the leadership concept, because nowhere else would you find a lot of the principles that you and I teach hundreds and thousands every year than in the military. And one of the reasons why I'm such a very big history buff is because of the military. And one example that jumps to mind is Alexander the Great and the likes. And I think to myself, do you know what it takes for a man to command the loyalty of thousands of people to give their lives? Literally. Even when you sell a treasure at the end of the rainbow, and you tell Chris, go to Syria, let's go and fight. I assure you they are going to get $1 million. I'm still going to consider my life. But this man literally dropped a lot. But one thing that I have often found that whether it was Napoleon, whether it was Alexander the Great, was that they always try their best never to lose touch. Alexander the Great was known to leave his royal tent and go and sleep by the fireside with the men. Know the men. Napoleon was known to have a photographic brain of remembering the names of his soldiers. All that is beautiful. But now let me twist it a bit, Mel, and try and make it more realistic for some listeners on this live. Some people are leading businesses, some are leading organizations, some are leading in government areas. The world as we know it from 20, 30 years ago has changed. What do I mean by that? Now we have the Jack Ma syndrome. There is a cosmopolitan shift where, even because of economic reasons, if you are the CEO of an organization, you find out that you have diverse people from diverse ethnicity. And what that presents itself is a challenge, a leadership challenge on its own. You are leading, if you're in Nigeria, for those who are listening in Nigeria, for instance, you are leading a Yoruba person, an Hausa person, an Igbo person. These people are coming with their own mental, as it were, setup of what leadership should represent. I'm an Edo man. In my culture, there's a concept of a king. In some other cultures, they may not necessarily appreciate the concept of a king. Now, I want to ask you, how do you lead in tough times when you have such a spread, as it were, of individuals who represent, and we may be talking to some individuals on this call who may have the opportunity of leading globally. And you know fully well that when you're leading globally, you are dealing with diversity at its highest levels. How do you lead when it comes to diversity in tough times?
Mm. All right. Great questions. And, you just talked about the peculiarity of the times that we are. And just one thing that I would like to add is that, for those who are listening in and may feel, oh, you know what, I'm not having to deal with that now. I think it's important that we all start to dig our wells before we get thirsty. And what I mean by that is that we start to build competence around these areas, because we may say, oh, we don't need it. We don't need this skill right now. I'm not currently engaging with this. Please, whatever you're picking up from here, start to build muscles around it now. So what I would say is, when it comes to diversity, irrespective of, color, ethnicity, race, religious beliefs, uh, leaders of today first have to understand that people are first people, right? People are first people, and that we have different personalities, and irrespective of what I would classify to be internal dimensions of diversity, be it age, be it your ethnicity, be it your physical ability, whatever it is. All of us as individuals have certain behavioral expressions, which is termed under the umbrella of our personality, right? And I always say that for every individual who has to deal with people, we need to equip ourselves with this understanding of personality. And while we may have to now explore the world through various cultures, especially when we have to relate with other people, that's something else that I'm going to talk about. But we first have to understand the place of personalities and differences in personalities to start with, because whether you are blue, whether you're orange, we all have certain behavioral traits and characteristics, that and that's why there's a lot of standardization. For example, when we look at personality tests, where whether you're from India, whether you're from America, you take this test and we see behavioral patterns, right? We can relate with it. That so I say that for starters, every individual who is a leader, or who is particular about leadership, has to also be a people manager, right? Which means that they have to equip and empower themselves with skills that can help them thrive and understand people a lot more. So understanding of personality and personality differences is a good place to start with. Now, stepping out of that will be that a leader is now also able to equip themselves with the place of cultural differences, right? Cultural differences, and you cannot appreciate other people's culture when you're not aware about it. Okay, so I say that every leader also has to invest in what we call cultural awareness. Now, when we talk about cultural awareness, I don't want us thinking on this call, so you mean I need to understand, all the cultures of the world? No. It is that the more you engage with people, you start to open your minds, around them. So it could be about you visiting a place, for example. It's not just you visiting and then taking pictures and coming out to tell us, oh, I've been here, I've been there. No. How do people behave here, right? What is their culture? You go into a space, and when I talk about, going into spaces, I'm not even just talking about going to another country. You go into a workplace. There are certain things you start to notice around. Oh, how are people here? Everybody is going about. Yes, good morning, sir. Good afternoon, sir. You start to notice certain behaviors. That's a culture. So, a leader who wants to thrive in tough times has to be environmentally and situationally aware of any environment they find themselves, or even anyone they encounter. Now that helps them build their data collection in such a way that when I encounter somebody else from this space, I can say, okay, I've met 3 people here, I've met 4 people from this space. This seems to be, probably how certain cultures or certain behaviors that I can attribute to them. It could be in how they greet, it could be in how they communicate, right? I've seen situations where I'm sending out a message to someone based on the probably country that they are from, and I may have to modify, my language based on my awareness of, okay, so for example, you may want to write an email like, oh, please, can I'd like to have it by the end of work today. But in a particular culture or in particular countries, it's unacceptable. You can't just talk like that. For them, you are shouting, you are screaming, right? You will type, it will be nice to have it by the end of work today. We're still saying the same thing, because when they read it, they understand, you know what, I need to have that thing today. But you have said it in a way that it doesn't look offensive to them, because you understand probably how they deal, right? So we want to come from a place where you build your awareness around people, you build your awareness around culture, and like I said, you cannot build awareness around culture, or you cannot build your cultural diversity if you do not have cultural awareness, or if you assume everybody is the same, we talk the same way, just how I am, that kind of thing. Also, a leader who wants to be able to build that level of diversity in tough times also has to acknowledge the place of diversity of thoughts and perspectives, and then be willing to accommodate, that varying expression in people. So either it's in how they think, how they believe. You have to be in a place where you understand that you're not the only right person. You're not the only person who has, the arsenal of knowledge, experience and all of that. So you have to be in a place where you're willing to accommodate people, you're willing to accommodate their thoughts, and you're just willing to also empower people, right?
Mm,
One other key thing is building the competence of communication.
mm,
Communication is also very key because it will help you thrive in tough times, and I can't even stress how golden communication
yeah.
is in tough times. So I think those are four things that I would say
Okay.
that can
So,
absolutely help.
you are an amazing communicator. We learn from you, and I honor that grace on you. And I know how important it is for every leader to be able to build up their communication skills. Because it's one thing to have in the womb of your leadership a vision, but if you can't express that vision, it's always going to be difficult. There are several expressions of man's capabilities only being executed through other men because of their ability to communicate. Now, so whilst you were speaking again, there's a particular, I have so many people that I admire when it comes to leadership. In the business world, there's a man by the name of Ray Dalio. He owns Bridgewater Associates, one of the wealthiest men in the world. And I like the fact that he's such a leader that acknowledges everything you just captured: blind spots, communication. He's one of the only few leaders that I know that in his organization will literally give his subordinates an opportunity to rate his own skills. Something that I know that a lot of Nigerians have left the WhatsApp group. They would not stay in that group where the subordinate is the one telling you as a leader. Now, I totally get that. Still stretching a bit on the diversity. There's a king I like, and I don't know if um, you would propagate this leadership model to other people as well who are on this call. There's a king I like. His name was King Cyrus, spoken of in the Bible, when God said that a certain man will come and allow the Israelites to be set free, build the temple for them, even fund it. And the irony was his name was actually said prophetically. It wasn't like there will be a man. But what a lot of people do not know, and that's one of the things when I wrote the book, So You Want to Lead, and I did a deep dive into King Cyrus's life, I found something very unique, Mrs. Kemai. And what I found really unique about his style of leadership was he was a king of both the Persians and the Medes. Now, he ruled an empire that stretched the entire globe. But there was something he did. Every time he took over a new territory, he wouldn't change the culture. He wouldn't even touch the religion. He would leave people just the way they are. And all he would just do is appoint his representative, who is the bridge towards him. Now, in tough times, do you think that such a model works? Let's say in the business world, Chris is buying over XYZ company organization, or I'm spreading my tentacles politically. Do you think it honestly makes sense for you to maintain the status quo for you to be able to lead effectively in a tough time? Or is there a need to reinvent the wheel? Is there a need for me to go in there and, like we know the Nigerian and African style, flush everybody out and start building afresh with my own people? What do you think is the best time? Because I see this happen a lot in Africa, in Nigeria, like you and I know. A new leader comes on board, whether it's corporate Nigeria, whether it's political Nigeria, the first thing they do, the very first thing they do is announce the sack of everybody. But yeah, 400, 500, thousands of years ago, we are seeing leaders using a different model. What model would you recommend?
All right. So I think for starters, it's important to know that every situation is unique, and every every leader has their own unique style, right? But beyond that is the place of vision and leadership, right? And also alignment of vision. When people get into leadership for wrong reasons, or they do not have a clear vision. Neither do they have, competence around the essence of leadership, or in places where they have a vision for the position, and how they should be serving, or they do not honor competence, right? We may have situations where, people just get in and it's all about, oh, okay, you know what? Let's flush every other person out and all of that. And, I should also mention that there's a place of, politics, and all of that, but I don't want to get into all of that. But when we start by understanding that every situation is different, right? And beyond even getting to political scenes and all of that, you get into a space. What you want to start to do is first understand and analyze, what exactly are we dealing with here, right? What exactly are we dealing with here? What's the goal? What do we want to be able to achieve? Whatever we want to achieve, is it in the best interest of the people? Is it in the best interest of the of this cause? I think those are some considerations to start with. Now, if we're able to have clarity around that, then we can start to see, what changes do we need to make here, right? Do we have the right culture? Do we need to, can we maintain this culture, or do we need people with fresh insights? Those are some of the considerations that can help you now say, oh, we need new direction here. However, we also understand the peculiarity of change, right? That when we come into a new era, there definitely comes some level of disruption. There will come level of anxiety. People are not sure, okay, what's going to happen? Am I losing my job? What is this new leader bringing? Are they going to bring in their people? Are they going to think that we're not good enough? Naturally, it comes with its own fair share of fear and anxiety. Now, a leader's job is not to add to that anxiety. It is first to acknowledge, right? And then, from the place of vision, from the place of effective communication, and with the right character, we're able to navigate people and ease them through that change. Now, I've seen situations where people have stepped into new positions, new power, and then they had to let people go, unfortunately, right? And I've seen situations also where even those who have been let go have come to the place of understanding that, oh, okay, we
It was
understand,
necessary that
right?
we had to
It
go.
was necessary. So I think it won't just be a blanket approach to say, oh, when people come in, maintain status quo, or let people off, let people go. No, it will be, what are we dealing with? Because if we're coming in without vision, of course there will be a lot of anyhowness, and then people can do and undo. But if we're coming in with, okay, this is the situation, right? Acknowledge the situation, and then be clear about the vision. But when you're also clear about this vision, you understand that this level of clarity should not just reside with you. It is something that you also have to be able to relate, and relate to the people that you're leading, so that you can all be on the same page. And that's why a lot of change efforts fail on arrival, right? Because even with the best intention, if communication is not right, if you're not clear about what you want to achieve, it may just be
Just
another
fizzle
full-time
away.
effort. Exactly. So you want to start from that point and be sure that whatever you're doing it truly in the best interest
Interest.
of
Okay.
whatever it is that you have to do.
So I'm staring at the clock, and because I have so many questions for you, and I know how expensive it is to attend your class. So don't blame me for trying to take advantage. No, I know. So please forgive me. Now that I have you this 1 hour, God knows that after this class, I'm just going to put MBA leadership after my name because I know how much it costs. But I'm going to ask you something. I'm seeing a lot of women join this call, and I know I'm a firm believer that I don't think leadership recognizes gender. One of the characters that I highlighted in my book was Elizabeth the First, not Elizabeth the Second. She was known as the king and queen in one. A woman who held parliament, held a lot of people. Now, in just a few seconds, before I ask you my other question, I will start tying it all up together. What would you be saying to a woman who's saying, "Oh, it's a man's world. Let me not bother. Men have taken over. There's no point." What would you be saying to those kind of women?
I would say that you shouldn't run yourself out of the race, right? You shouldn't run yourself out of the race. And I say this because truly, when it comes to leadership, I say leadership is shapeless, right? It's shapeless. And when we look at the lines of diversity, there's something we call the wheel of diversity. And I can't remember those who did that research, but they talk about the inner dimension, the secondary dimension of diversity. And within the inner dimension of diversity, you have things around age, you have things around, ethnicity, and quite a number of other elements. But in all of this, right, leadership is more of the choice that you make to lead. It is not so much about, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, whether you're black, whether you're white, no, it is more about the choice and the willingness and ability to take on responsibilities. And we live in a world that is quite polarized and, where over the years we've been made to believe certain things. But what do you believe about yourself? What do you see yourself as a person of value? Because people are bringing value irrespective of where they have found themselves. So first, see yourself as a person of value, be clear about the value that you bring, and be willing to develop the skills and competency, right? So there's a situation where you hear things over and over again. Things like, for example, oh, women don't like women, or women don't support women. You hear it so frequently to the point that you start believing it, right? Or you hear someone tell you over and over that, you know what, you're not smart. And then you truly start to believe you're not smart, right? So how are you reconditioning yourself? That's what I would say to the woman who is hearing this and thinking, oh, maybe leadership is not for me. No, it's not a function of your age, size. No, it is leadership. Just like if I have liquid and I put it in a bottle, right? It's going to take the shape of that bottle. So leadership is so much more about what you're shaping into yourself and what you want to become, the value that you're bringing, rather than your gender. I usually say, don't play value card, right? Don't play the gender card,
Play the
rather.
value card.
Play the value card. The world knows the place of value, and when you're able to bring that value, somehow, gender disappears.
Beautiful.
Right.
Now, some of those who have gone ahead of you and I in this space and in this field, and the same way in Christendom, we'll call some people the fathers of the faith. We have some fathers of leadership. One of them that happens to be my very dear friend, John C. Maxwell, will speak about influence and leadership. And also, of blessed memory, you have people like Miles Monroe, who spoke extensively about influence and leadership, right? So you and I would always be in class and we would tell our students that leadership is not about positions, it's not about titles, it's really about influence. In a few seconds or a few minutes, can you expand on that principle that leadership really is influence?
All right. So leadership is influence because, when we look at the things that shape the world, it is the convictions that people have, it is the beliefs that they have, right? And these beliefs are sometimes developed and formed based on certain interactions that they have had, people that they look up to. So you talk about, John C. Maxwell, for example, and, blessed memory, Miles Monroe. Miles Monroe, years after he's left this physical space,
He's
still has
impacting us.
huge influence on people. And that's really what influence is, that you go away from the physical and that you're able to, translate whatever level of change in the thoughts and beliefs of people. Now, that goes beyond what position can do, right? Because we've had people who are of higher positions who have ruled countries, but they don't have that sense or that ability to influence your mind and your thoughts. So whoever can shape your thoughts, whoever can, shape your beliefs, has great level of influence on you. We see a world where we talk about, influencing marketing now, right? Where people buy things that they don't need and they can't explain why they bought it. But then they saw somebody who they didn't even know had so much influence on them, wear it, advertise it, and here they are, trying to justify how they have spent 200,000, and they can't explain why. Right. So that's the power of influence. And when we can shape people's thoughts, beliefs, and drive that up to being able to shape their conviction, that is what influence is and it is powerful, and you don't need a position
To
to be able to do that.
well said. In fact, coincidentally, Sunday of this, Saturday of this coming week, by the grace of God, I'm ministering. For those who are also on the call, I'm ministering at the Fountain of Life Church, and I'm speaking about high definition influence. And even in my little research, like you said, it's so powerful what influence can do. I was teasing. I have a 7-year-old. I'm talking about Cristiano Ronaldo. My 7-year-old already knows how many followers Cristiano Ronaldo has on his YouTube page, and we both know that. Now, as we tie this up together, leadership, leadership. How best can we be able to allow people understand, like I said, that leadership really comes down to the most basic unit? Because, like I said, sometimes it goes over the head of people. I'm sure there's some people who joined this live call and they just had leadership. They just logged out and said, "Not me. It's not me they're talking about. Me, leadership is not me." And they logged out for no. Is leadership something that you're born with, or is it something that can be learned?
All right. So leadership, I would say, when we started the session, I think at some point I spoke about the place of nature and nurture, but I would say that when it comes to leadership, there's certain traits, and characteristics that we're all born with that has expression of leadership, right? But it is how we have come to narrow leadership down to effect and result,
Mm,
or in fact, for a lot of people,
mm,
results, right? And
mm,
when we talk about results in this frame, people being able to say, oh, you know what, this person achieved this,
mm,
this person achieved that. That's
mm.
all we see as leadership. So
Yeah.
when we see leadership as that, then we totally lose, the full essence of leadership,
Mm,
that it is a combination of elements, not just in how we can achieve tasks. When we look at leadership, we're looking at how we can, yes, accomplish tasks. We're looking at how we can work with and through others, and that drives a pace of influence, that drives a pace of, delegation, that drives a pace of teamwork, to how we can correct and modify our own behaviors, which is has to do with self leadership. Now, when we look at the different expressions of personality, different personalities are stronger in the different areas that I've mentioned. Some are able to accomplish tasks, but if all we see and all we have been conditioned over the years to appreciate is how people achieve tasks as leadership, that's why we have a lot of toxicity in our world today,
mm.
right? So leadership, yes, we all have some traits, we all have some attributes that we have been born with, but you can also nurture your way by, being able to learn about leadership, being able to develop certain behaviors, habits, skills, competencies to help you develop your leadership skills. So leadership is not just I was born with it. No, it is a deliberate choice, to modify and reshape yourself and groom yourself with great level of consistency to be able to, become that leader that you want to be. So it's not just a function of whether you were born with it, it's also how you're able to, nurture and groom yourself to become a great leader. So I'll say
So
it's a two-edged
the
sword,
two-edged sword.
not just
So my
one. Yeah.
very last, and I promise you, it's my last one. I promise you, it's my last one. I
Very
promise.
good.
I promise it's my last one because I know what 1 hour of your coaching. So I honor and respect you. Now, God loves leaders. God loves leadership. God exhibits good leadership. In fact, in my books, I speak extensively how Jesus Christ is the epic center of any form of leadership you want to think about. He personified it. Where does the leader's journey start? And where does the leader's journey end? Final question. Where does a
Okay.
leader's journey start? And where does a leader's journey truly end? Your
Mm.
perspective.
Okay. So I would say that, the leader's journey starts way before we were even born, right? It starts way before we were born. And but bringing it in the literary sense is, the moment we start to experience the world, we are influencing and making an impact in one way or another,
Mm,
right? I've seen people who have been impacted by the lives of little
mhm,
babies, right? And I've seen people who have been impacted by, people at different stages of life. So I'd say that, impact starts right from when we were born, as we start to shape our behaviors. If I, for one, have a friend of blessed memory now who passed on when she was 6, right? And I tell her to be my best friend, but till today, right, she still has influence on my life because I saw how she was really meticulous about doing things. I saw the warmth and joy that she brought to every situation. And long after she's left this
Earthly realm.
world, you know, she still influences me. So I would say that leadership also doesn't end when we exit the world, right? Long after we have
Well
gone, long after we
said.
have gone, we still have the level of impact. And that's why I'm always
Well said.
particular about the trails that we're leaving. When people leave just for today and just, oh, what am I? As in, of blessed memory, she was just 6. We were 6 at that time, right? But this is how many years after? Way over 30 years after. But the impact is still there. No, she didn't write a book, right? She didn't organize a seminar, but she lived. And her life was a living testimony of, what one should embody as a person. So I would say that it starts right from when we were born, but it doesn't end. Right? There's no
Without them.
expiration to how we can influence. You spoke about Miles Monroe of best memory. His books are still selling out even till today, and generations long after us, will
Yeah.
still be shaped by his life and his teaching. So
It, be,
it doesn't end,
it doesn't
and
end.
yeah,
A befitting way to conclude, and may your soul rest in peace. I totally agree with you. I subscribe to your notion that the leadership journey starts from the very first point of consciousness and truly never ever ends. How do I say a big thank you to you now? It's just to fly over to where you are, give you a hug, and fly back. So if you can please share with me your address, I'll just fly down. I promise I won't stay. I'll fly, give you a hug, then I'll fly right back with the next flight. But I honor God's grace in your life. Like I say, amazing work that you're doing across the nations, amazing work you're doing in impacting lives and transforming mindset when it comes to leadership. We are in their need of your skill, we are in their need of your wisdom, and that is why I pray that it would never run dry. That the
Amen.
same wisdom that you are exhibiting and that you are pouring into our lives, pouring into my life and the lives of thousands, if not millions, that impact will literally reverberate across the earth. There will
Amen.
be a ripple effect. Your words will not just fall to the ground. And even though
Amen.
you took it as a joke earlier on, I prophetically speak over your life that indeed the doors of government are opened unto you. That when you
Amen.
start to speak, you find out that the government start listening to you. There's going to be a demand
Amen.
upon you, woman of God, where people are going
Amen.
to start asking for unusual concepts, unusual models that are unique to situations. Thus
Amen.
saith the Lord. I love you, darling.
Amen.
Thank you
Amen.
so
Amen.
much.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much for
joining us
having
on
me.
this live. For
Thank
everyone
you.
who's still on this call, make sure you're following both pages. Drop up to my DM, leadership, your email will send you a gift. Thank you so much for taking our time. I appreciate you. And
Thank
for
you.
everyone else, we have 2 more lives this week. I'll be hosting a gentleman by the name of El Shaka. You need to listen to him. He's an old man in a young man's body. We'll be speaking on Wednesday. And on Thursday, drum roll, I would have the one and only Apostle Femi Lazarus on Conversations with the CEO. So look out for the flyer, look out, set your reminder. I promise this to be exciting. To everyone that is supporting all our conversations, thank you. Those who are sending DMs, I want to buy the book, link in bio, click, drop a DM. There are 5 books that speak to leadership, relationship, and finance. We're in our pre-order phase, and God is doing amazing things. Thank you for giving me the gift of your time. I hope it was worth your efforts and your investment. Till I see you again on Wednesday, I remain the CEO. God bless you. Have an amazing night rest. Bye bye.